The Lord be with you. And with your spirit. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew. On that day, Jesus went out of the house and sat down by the sea. Such large crowds gathered around him that he got into a boat and sat down, and the whole crowd stood along the shore. And he spoke to them at length in parables, saying, "A sower went out to sow, and as he sowed, some seed fell on the path, and the birds came and ate it up. Some fell on rocky ground, where it had little soil. It sprang up at once because the soil was not deep, and when the sun rose, it was scorched, and it withered for lack of roots. Some seed fell among thorns, and the thorns grew up and choked it. But some seed fell on rich soil and produced fruit, 100 or 60 or 30-fold. Whoever has ears ought to hear." The Gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ. I think that much of the tension in our politics and our American culture arise from two opposing perspectives: a perspective of scarcity or a perspective of abundance. And which perspective you have will shape how you engage your world. Do we live in an America with abundant opportunities, with expanding freedoms? Are we the wealthiest nation on earth, or are we living in a land of diminishing returns, shrinking resources, and economic decline? Do you approach your world from a perspective of scarcity or abundance? Which stance is most godlike for you? Now, clearly, as Jesus proclaims in today's gospel, God is an extravagant giver. What a terrible farmer God is, throwing his seed. Really, I've been working on the garden all spring long, and I got to tell you, you have to conserve everything there. But God, no, everywhere. Rocky ground, thorns. God's gift is without limit. And God gives God's very self to creation. So to approach your world with this attitude of abundance is to mirror God by being extravagant givers ourselves, knowing that God's grace overflows. This is the image of God and the face that we can show the world. We can live in a world of abundant grace. But the problem is that as humans, we have a natural tendency toward the opposite. Right? Instinctually, we move towards self-preservation and security. By nature, we fear the worst, that bad times are upon us. And when we have that sense, whether it's true or not, we shrink. We shrink. We curl up upon ourselves. And because of this, whether we are poor or not, we tend to act out of this sense of scarcity, fearing that we will never have enough, and that we need to be careful in what we give away, that we can't afford to be generous. This is what we see playing out in our politics, in the desire to slash our services to the poor and needy because we cannot afford such luxuries as welfare. We can't afford such luxuries as Medicaid, health care for the poor. But it also can play out in our families and our neighborhoods too. We become stingy with our time, stingy with our love and our compassion, counting the cost, calculating the benefits. We need to challenge that. When you find it in yourself, push back on that. And whenever we hear a politician say we can't afford to help the homeless or provide health care as a human right, That's nonsense. Remind them that we do not live in a nation of scarcity, but of abundance. God, from everything we can see, is so rich in love and mercy that God can afford to be wasteful, overgenerous, non-calculating, non-discriminating, incredibly risk-taking, big-hearted beyond our imagination. That's how we need to be. Always, always expanding our hearts and our love and our care in an ever-growing circle of compassion.